Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rachel Paul with IAAP, and we appreciate your time today. Just to let you know, we do have closed captioning provided. You can select the closed captioning icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we also have ISL interpreter here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and turn today's program over to Monica Duom to introduce our panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, and hello to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you in this conference in Smart Cities Ensuring Urban Equality Through Technology for All. This is an event that's been hosted, thank you very much, by UN Habitat and the World Blind Union. It's a real pleasure to be here. We have great panelists. We have panelists from the UN. I'll just introduce Doug in a second, but we're going to discuss the importance of inclusive technology for persons with disabilities within the smart cities context. And we will hear from also leaders that were there in different cities that push toward those programs, and then we'll discuss a bit on the impact. So thank you very much for being here. And I will leave the floor to Doug Regan, who's going to address us from UN Habitat some words. Thank you. Doug, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And just to, again, echo that it's an honor to be here. My name is Doug Regan. I work with the Human Rights and Social Inclusion Unit of UN Habitat. We were just completed our big General Assembly, which happened last week. And we worked very closely with the World Blind Union. So again, it's really exciting to be partnering with them on this event so soon afterwards. As mentioned, we're gathered here today to discuss the importance of accessible smart city technologies and how they contribute to urban equity for all. The United Nations Smart City Platform defines a smart city as an innovative city that utilizes information and communication technologies to improve quality of life, urban operations, services, and competitiveness. It emphasizes meeting the needs of present, future generations in various aspects. So UN Habitat, as well as working with the World Blind Union, has made people-centered smart cities a priority in our strategic plan for the next 3 years. We recognize, as I know many of you do here, the potential of technology to transform urban environments and have developed tools and approaches for urban professionals to do that. These initiatives include addressing the digital divide, promoting co-creation and collaboration, and building capacity for local and regional governance. As mentioned, we just completed our assembly. So just a bit of a background, UN Habitat is the UN agency charged with urban sustainability in the UN system. It makes us unique because we partner directly with cities. We're mandated to work with them. If you know many other UN agencies, they're mandated to work with national governments, but we work with what we would call subnational governments or cities. So the assembly that we have held last week is held once every 4 years. And at that time, we kind of set the urban agenda for the United Nations system and the multilateral system. So at last assembly, which we had a large number of member states, countries of the world attending, we adopted a resolution on accessible smart cities, highlighting the importance of inclusive urban development that ensures, again, equal access and opportunities for all citizens with a particular focus on equity. Today, I'm going to, and this session is going to focus on why accessible smart city technologies are crucial and how this our recent resolution is also relevant to what we're talking about here, especially as we kind of pitch the tent for the larger UN and the world in terms of how we're going to deal with accessibility. I think what in the work we did last week and then the work we've done the World Blind Union and other groups, we've really acknowledged the critical role of digital technologies in cities. They provide innovative solutions, alternatives to traditional approaches, especially during emergencies like the COVID-19 pandemic. As we saw, I mean, we were all digital and nothing but digital. So, I mean, to be accessible, we we went very extreme during the pandemic. The digital technologies contribute to improve access to services, enhance efficiencies, and reduce CO2 footprints, and many, many other things. We also, though, when we were at the assembly last week, and we discussed a lot about some of the barriers as well. UN Habitat is one of the 2 United Nations agencies based in the global south, the developing world. Us and the United Nations Environment Program are based in Nairobi, Kenya. So we're very aware of what we would call the digital divide. So, and that's the divide between those who can access technology and those who cannot access technology. So digital transformation can inadvertently replicate offline exclusion, inequalities, and power imbalances. It is crucial to ensure inclusivity in this transformation to prevent further inequalities and exclusion or reinforce existing accessibility barriers. So what we don't want to have happen is that using technology further marginalizes people with disabilities. We need an equity-based approach, and it's essential to use this as a way to guide and an equity-based approach and a human rights-based approach. To bridge the digital divide, it is necessary to address various aspects, including access to technology, as I mentioned, digital literacy, equitable outcomes, representation in data, and such. By addressing these issues, we can create an inclusive digital environment that promotes equity and ensures equal opportunities and outcomes for all citizens. As we move towards an increasingly digital future, and as we know, I know we're overwhelmed these days with AI and ChatGPT and so on and so on. I mean, we see the digital future coming at us quicker than we ever have before. So as we move towards this digital future very rapidly, there's an urgent need for local governments and national governments to make this transformation inclusive. It has to be at the core of what we're doing. And I would say inclusive, equitable, and equity and equality are 2 different things, which we might want to discuss here. But and then the third place, it's a human right. Human rights have to be at the basis of what we're doing. That means everyone's included in and it's a basic premise of how we're working. So by doing this and by looking at ensuring equality, equity, human rights are at the basis, we can prevent the exacerbation of existing inequalities, barriers and exclusion in urban settings, and promote equal access to smart technologies. As we know, persons with disabilities face disproportionate impacts from digital barriers. The digital divide often amplifies the challenges they already face in accessing essential services, education, employment, social opportunities, and contributes to inequalities in the urban environment. So number one, and this is especially poignant in the developing world and where we sit in Nairobi, affordability is a significant barrier for many people, for many disabled people. Accessible technologies can be costly, limiting their availability and hinder in equal participation. Ensuring equitable access to affordable and inclusive technology is crucial to promote urban equity. We can't underline this enough, and again, especially in the developing world, or as we sit here in Africa. How are we going to assure we cannot just have aspirational access to technology, we must have real access to technology. As well, online platforms and digital services often lack accessibility features, making them inaccessible to persons with disabilities. This creates barriers to their full participation and inclusion in the digital realm, further perpetuating inequalities. Ensuring inclusive design and accessibility of digital platforms promotes equity and equal opportunities for all individuals. It is crucial to recognize the importance of providing equal access to smart cities technologies for essential services. Accessible technologies empower persons with disabilities to engage fully in their communities, access information and services, and contribute to society, promoting equity in urban environments, as I've mentioned. And so I think in looking at wrapping up, or kind of looking at the reflection we have on the resolution, the UN Habitat resolution that we passed. And again, this resolution is for the United Nations system. The resolution is that this will be used by the 193 countries of the UN system, but as well, all the, what again we would call the subnational governments, or the cities. So this resolution was very important, and I guess I mean, oftentimes people look at bureaucracies and they're like, oh, it's just another bureaucracy, it's just another document that's not going to be real. But I think this document is real if we assure that it impacts and it affects policy. And that is kind of our role, but partnering with World Blind Union and other partners here, as well as local governments, we have to assure that happens. The resolution that we passed recognized the profound impact of digitalization in smart cities on human settlements. We just cannot underline that it's so critical. It acknowledges the potential benefits, but also the risks and challenges, as I've mentioned, such as exacerbating the inequalities, accessibility barriers, and compromise. Another area that I didn't mention is compromising privacy rights is something we also have to look at. The resolution that we passed emphasized the importance of people-centered and equity-based approach to urban digitization. Again, when we're looking at people-centered, we have to make sure that we are serving the needs of people. We have to be able to assess what those are, and especially in the disability community. And what we're not, I'll go farther and say we're not necessarily looking it's not only equality we're looking at, it's equity. We need to be able to come to and work with people at where they're at and what their strengths and their weaknesses are. We can't just assume everyone's equal. That is a good meta goal or larger goal, but when we were actually operationalizing, we need to make sure that we are equitable and we make sure that no one is marginalized because we're doing a bigger or broader perspective. The resolution highlights the importance of involving diverse stakeholders. Again, and so my focus in UN Habitat is young people, which make up a vast majority of the developing world. For example, in Nairobi or in Africa, in general, cities, young people make up to 70% of the population. So when we're looking at young disabled people, we have to make sure we look at youth and what they need and what children need. So, I mean, that's a critical and somewhat different than if we're looking at the developed world. We also have to look at older persons. We have to look at vulnerable populations. Again, here in Nairobi, we 60% of the population is in informal settlements and slums. What does that mean? It means that they don't have access to infrastructure. They don't have access to iPhones. They don't have access to iPads. They don't have access to any of this digital technology. So when we come up with strategies, when we come up with policies, when we implement this policy this resolution that we passed, we have to make sure those are there. So that's in the developing world. But in the developed world, we have the same situations. When we work with indigenous communities, when we work with rural communities, when we work with marginalized urban populations, we again still need to assure that we elevate everyone, that as the water rises, it brings everyone up and not just a few. The resolution that we passed also emphasized capacity building, digital literacy, governance, transparency, and accountability. We really need to look at how we could build the capacity of communities, and not just that we're servicing them and giving them what they need, but that we're giving them the capacity to actually build it themselves, because this then becomes something that is fit for purpose, that it's not just something that we're imposing upon them. And that, I mean, we see this often in development, in the development context, where we have a complete a solution that we impose from the developed world on the developing world, and it just doesn't fit. You need to be able to increase the capacity of communities to be able so that they can design it themselves. So when we're looking at training, capacity building, and it's again, one of our clients, if you want to call it, of the United Nations or UN Habitat is local government. So we need to make sure they know. And we all know, I mean, when you're looking at the basic services, the direct services, it's local government that provides those, whether it's the physical, if we're looking for the disabled community, the physical services, whether it's, wheelchair ramps, whether it's accessible buses and transportation, or whether, that's the kind of the physical economy, but then the digital economy as well. We need, whether we're looking at libraries or access as well. I mean, it's local government is the first line. National government is very important to engage, but local government actually delivers the services, and we need to make sure they're on side. So for us, and just to kind of wrap up here, the relevance of the resolution we passed, and I will put this in, I'll put the resolution, or ask one of my partners here in UN Habitat to put it in the chat. The resolution, and this is, we really think is important and clear. We also have seen a strong commitment by the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, about, and he's made a number of statements over the last week or so about the need to service, to make sure that we engage the disabled community and make sure that we provide and we advocate for equality and equity. For a long time, the deployment of technologies framed by the smart city approach has not been fully people-centered or grounded in an equity-based and human rights-based approach. That has to change. We have to do that now. And especially with the significant changes we see in our environment, whether it be climate change, as we've seen last week in New York.
Audio now.
And then, sorry, someone else is talking.
No, sorry. Mr. Reagan, can you please wrap up very quickly, please?
Yes. So therefore, there needs to be, we've developed global guidelines that will guide the development of smart cities to be inclusive, accessible, and equitable for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reagan. And thank you for the emphasizing on equity and the human-centric centricity of urban digitization. And thank you for the UN Habitat on its great work for promoting the rights of persons with disabilities to urban digitization. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Lutfi. I'm sorry I'm late. I was supposed to start moderating the session. I'm G3ict Director for Capacity Building and Advocacy and the Managing Director for Digital Accessibility Right Education Academy. Without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Mark Workman, CEO of World Blind Union. And I would like to, Mr. Mark, ask you the question of, why do you think accessibility is important for a smart city, and why does it matter to you?
Thanks, Mohammed. I appreciate that. So I'm Mark Workman. I'm the CEO of the World Blind Union, and I'm also someone who's blind himself. And I'm going to do something a little different with this question than I would normally do. So I would often talk about CRPD compliance, emphasizing Article 9 and the obligations associated with that article. And all of that is very important, and we'll probably hear more about that this afternoon. But I personally find that examples and stories can really help me to remember different ideas and connect more deeply with those ideas. So I'd like those who are watching or listening to imagine a scenario along with me. Imagine you're someone who's blind and you need to get to a doctor's appointment, for example. Now you want to time your travel so that you arrive there on time. And so you go on the Transit Authority's website to find out what the bus schedule is, but you discover that the transit website is not compliant with accessibility standards. Buttons are not labeled, tables are not structured properly, and despite your best efforts, you're not able to find out what the schedule is. But you've dealt with this before, so you decide to try calling the contact center for the city to see if they can help. You do finally reach someone, but because the city officials expect that everyone will use the website, there are very few contact center staff, and you're left waiting on hold for 20 minutes. So what would have taken someone else 1 minute ends up taking you nearly an hour and has left you feeling pretty frustrated. But you now have what you need, so you get to the bus stop on time. Even though this bus is equipped with GPS, which provides really helpful information to passengers and useful data to the city, there are no automatic bus stop announcements on this bus. You've dealt with this before, though, so you ask the driver to let you know when you reach your stop. And throughout the trip, you stay hyper vigilant. You pay attention to every turn of the bus to make sure you're ready to get off when it's your stop. You'd rather be listening to a podcast or reading a book or just thinking about your plans for the weekend, but you need to stay focused on the trip, as it's the only way for you to keep track of your location. And it turns out it's a good thing you're paying attention, because you start to realize that you've been on the bus a bit longer than you probably should have. You really don't want to disturb the driver, but you finally decide you have to ask to make sure you haven't missed your stop. And the driver apologizes profusely and tells you that they were distracted by the traffic, which was particularly bad, and you're now 2 stops past the one you wanted. So you're in an area of the city that you're not very familiar with. You're starting to run late for your appointment. So you make your way as quickly as you can back in the direction the bus came from, so you can get there to an area you're more familiar with. And on your way, you come across a very busy intersection. There's no audible signal at this intersection though, but you've dealt with this before. So you listen to the traffic to try to figure out the patterns. There's just something a little strange with this intersection though. Maybe there's some type of advanced light that's a part of it, or maybe it's one of these scramble intersections that the city has been installing, or maybe the traffic just isn't consistent at this particular intersection. So for whatever reason, you're not able to determine when you have the right of way, but feeling like you might miss your appointment altogether, you decide to risk it. And when you feel it's safe to cross, you start to make your way across the street. But after only a short walk, your cane taps another curb, you step up, and then you find after a couple of feet that there's a drop off. And you realize you're standing on the median in the middle of the intersection. And just as that dawns on you, traffic starts to flow in front of you and behind you, and you're feeling embarrassed and you're feeling frustrated and unsafe. And finally, after what feels like forever, the traffic comes to a stop. You're able to step off and complete the crossing. You do eventually make it to the doctor's appointment, but 25 minutes late, feeling exhausted, feeling sad, feeling angry, feeling like it shouldn't be so hard. And after being chastised for being late, you do eventually get to see the doctor, which is really all you wanted to do in the first place. Now, I don't really have to imagine this scenario, what it's like, because I've experienced all of it on multiple occasions, and many people with disabilities don't need to imagine this either. These are the barriers that we face every day, and it really shouldn't be so hard. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be so hard. The website could have been designed in a way that was compliant with existing standards so that you could access it with a screen reader. The bus could have included automated stop announcements so you could know where you are on the route. And the traffic signal could have included an audible component so you'd know when you have the right of way. The solution to these barriers exist, but they're just not being implemented widely enough. And as a result, the tasks that people without disabilities take for granted, like accessing healthcare, using government services, moving around their community, these tasks become frustrating at best and dangerous and unsafe or even impossible at worst. And I really hope that this short example of mine is useful in highlighting just why accessibility matters and the impact that the lack of accessibility can have on people with disabilities. And with that, Mohammed, I'll turn it back over to you, and I look forward to listening to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Mark. You reminded me of a story that happened to me as well, as a blind person crossing a street with that island. It's very scary. Thank you very much, Mark, with sharing this practical example of why accessibility matters for smart cities and matters for persons with disabilities. Allow me now to give the floor to our first panelist, and I would like to remind all panelists if we can please stick to 5 minutes. I'd love to give the floor now to Ms. Karen Tamley from the city of Chicago. And Ms. Tamley, I would like to ask you, can you share with us, from the perspective of a local experience, what are the, the successes and the challenges that you have experienced while trying to install accessibility standards for Chicago, for the city of Chicago?
Sure.
IAAP.
Oops. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Karen Tamley. I'm the president and CEO of Access Living. We're a center for independent living, serving and advocating for people with disabilities in Chicago. We're an NGO. And also one of our priorities here is closing the digital divide in Chicago. I'm also a person with a disability myself. I use a wheelchair. Prior to my role here as CEO, I worked for 14 years as the commissioner for the mayor's office for people with disabilities for the city of Chicago. It's a cabinet level position that was I was appointed by 3 different mayors over that time, and my role was really to advise the mayor on disability issues and to work with other city departments on accessibility and making sure that accessibility was part of everything we did. Chicago was also one of the original pilot cities for the G3ict maturity model. And that was a really important experience for us because it really helped bring together all of our public facing departments to really see where we were around digital access and inclusion and where it was we need to focus more attention. The other great thing about it was it really got the attention of city officials at the highest level of government. I want to just briefly maybe touch on 2 initiatives that I worked on that was related to digital access at the city, some challenges and some successes we had, and then some tips I have for other municipalities in how we might create more accessible smart cities and urban environments. So it was a number of years ago, and our city was rolling out some payment kiosks that were located in neighborhoods throughout the city. It was a way for people to be able to pay their water bill or their traffic tickets. So they didn't have to go down to City Hall, or if they didn't have internet, or if they just didn't feel comfortable paying online. So the original rollout of the kiosk was not accessible. It was not accessible for a wheelchair user because it was too high. The screen had glare. A blind person couldn't use it either because it had no audio outputs or controls to be able to pay your bills. And so rightfully so, there was a very big outcry from the disability community, particularly the blind community. And I think the way the city deployed it really didn't work from start to finish. Not only was there not attention paid to accessibility standards, but the community wasn't aware of its rollout, nor had input in the design or testing before it hit the streets. And so when the city was also seeking the contractor to build it, to us, there was not any apparent specified language in the contract that it had to be accessible. So from start to finish, there were challenges, right? After a lot of outcry and then support from my office located within city government, we really turned it around for the second version. So we made sure that when we did the bid for the new vendor, we included accessibility language. When we selected the vendor, we made sure that they would build the kiosk and understood accessibility standards. Then we connected with the vendor on the design and engaged the disability community from the very get-go. Specifically, our residents who are blind and low vision, residents using wheelchairs to come in and test the prototypes multiple times before it went live. And I think the fact that we had to go through multiple rounds of revisions really confirmed the fact that these steps were absolutely necessary to getting it right. A good example that followed this was when we really reinvented the process of centering the voices of disabled people was when the city was launching its mobile 311 request line. So in Chicago, 311 is a line that you can call or go online in your smartphone to get a sidewalk fix or fill a pothole or get a tree trimmed, whatever city need, non-emergency, you might see out there that you need help getting addressed. So the city really engaged the blind community from the very beginning and throughout the designing and the testing of the mobile app. Not only did they get it right, but the blind community then became the ambassadors for the product. And I can tell you there wasn't anything more powerful than getting people with disabilities themselves to endorse a product and talk about it amongst their peers. So that was really the double benefit of this inclusion. So just to summarize real quick, I think some of my high-level tips as a government official, as a disabled person, as someone now running an NGO that serves disabled people, some of my top things would be in terms of ensuring that your city is accessible is, number one, having the commitment at the highest level of your local government. I appreciated hearing the comments about the importance of local government, and that's really where things are happening. So getting that commitment publicly and internally by your mayor, your city manager, whatever your leader is, to talk about the importance of accessibility. The message needs to be out there. That accessibility is critical, and that if you're going to do business with our city, you're going to deliver us an accessible product. You also must have an understanding within your city of what accessibility laws or guidelines or mandates apply to whatever you're rolling out. That can be different, obviously, depending on what your product or your service is. So I would also say using that procurement process, using the buying power of your city is extremely powerful. I believe it's a really important way that we can use the purse strings to change the landscape of accessibility products out there. That if we're, a city with, 40,000 city employees and multi-billion-dollar budget, we can really change the landscape by saying you're not going to do business with us unless you have accessible products. Compliance is the first step, but usability is the second. And so disabled people really need to be at the center of at every stage, from inception to design to testing to rollout. And then lastly, the disability community input must be relevant and reflect your population. So you need the perspectives of people with multiple disabilities, right? Just because I use my wheelchair doesn't mean I understand what it's like to navigate the city or use a city service as a blind person. And so we really need the voices from multiple disability perspectives to make sure that we are fully, genuinely, and authentically accessible. And then lastly, I just think I want to reiterate what was already said before, is that, all forms of digital access are a human right. If done right, it has huge advantages for the livability of people with disabilities in your city. And then lastly, smart cities cannot be truly smart unless they're accessible for everyone.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Thank you very much, Karen. Very insightful presentation, and definitely including persons with disabilities in decision-making and in every single step of design and planning, and everything is very important. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with the city of Chicago. Let me now move to our second panelist, Ms. Monica Duham. Monica, you work on the maturity model at G3ict. How does it work with smart cities? And from your experience, can you tell us, how does it work with local authorities and persons with disabilities, especially if we want to urge them to take the maturity model into consideration for promoting digital accessibility in smart cities?
Thank you, Mohammed. And it's me again. I'm the Director of Advocacy Center at G3ict. It's my pleasure to be here. And after what we heard from the resolution of the UN and Karen that has been working with her, it's sorry, I'm having a
hold up.
Monica, we cannot hear you well.
I'm having an internet problem.
Hello, Mohammed. This is Christopher. Monica's still there. Actually, she just left, it looks like.
All right. Well, why do we start with the next panelist, and then we'll come back to Monica. Let me now give the floor to Miss Catherine Chacon from I hope I pronounced this correctly. Planificación Urbana y Territorial, Quito, Ecuador. I would like to ask you about your experience with AI, artificial intelligence, and open
Karen Campbell
sidewalk
has left the meeting.
projects. Can you share with us your experience with this, and what are some of the challenges and successes you experienced in this program?
Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Chacon. Well, at G3ict, we work on inclusive urban sidewalks project to map accessible routes in 6 global cities. These were Quito, Sao Paulo, Santiago, Valparaiso, Los Angeles, and New York. We were working with these cities to implement all the terms of accessibility in all the routes that we were mapping. It's important to understand that data, AI, and machine learning help us the cities to improve management and outcomes of the critical segments. Accessibility data analytics are needed to improve the accessibility of the cities and the quality of life of persons with disabilities. In that vision, the participation of different stakeholders as public sector, private sector, the academy, federations of persons with disability, and civil society organizations was fundamental. Everyone has a specific role in this project, and this was so important because that gives the sustainability of the project and gives everyone a specific role. For example, the technical teams were in charge of the execution of the project. Also, for example, the academy and the civil society worked hard on the data collection. For Quito's case, it was all this information was attached to the mobility master plan. Each group had to participate in terms of creating a great level of sustainability of the project, and all the stakeholders were working on the data collected and implemented as a proper project of each institution. This project was so critical because it works in different scopes. The first one is the disability awareness. People working on this project was conscious of the physical barriers we have in the public space. They are aware of the elements of the streets, and the students have more knowledge on how to make environments accessible. For example, everyone was looking for all the barriers that we could have on the sidewalks and how they have to connect each other with all the maps and the routes that we have. The second one is the data collection. People are more engaged with the importance of big data. The usage of it and the power of this data creates a baseline. These baselines have never been worked before in these cities, and this was especially in Latin America. This information was so useful to create a public policy. They are aware of the elements on the streets, and the students have more knowledge on how to make environments accessible. The second, it allows the authorities and technical teams to establish strategies and urban development. These strategies can be monitored and evaluated over the time. This gives us indicators of how we are progressing on this type of projects and where we want to go and how we want to achieve. That measurement enables to have improvement indicators that the municipality can show to civil society and the world. The last one is the creation of the inclusive urban politics. The municipality can achieve inclusive cities if they establish this type of projects as part of their politics. The city can develop and strengthen its regulations, looking to achieve inclusive and accessible cities. In the same way, the municipality has a specific needs to achieve the SDGs. This project complements the program and the inclusive cities, so they adopt it as part of their strategies. Those are the things I learned along the process. I think the most important part here is that everyone was looking for all the awareness of disabilities and how they can start making implementations and so progress in terms of eliminating all the barriers that we can have in the public space. This baseline was created in terms to have this data, and all the city leaders can establish some strategies for the future to achieve more inclusive and accessible cities. This was the first time in a project that different stakeholders were participating together to have this data collection and also to have like a real map of how is the actual environment working in terms of accessibility. I think this was so important because people with disabilities were engaged of this, and as Karen told, no one was like assuming that the physical barriers were part of this type of actual space. Everyone was looking for example, which are the specific barriers that could be affecting the different disabilities, different persons with disabilities they are working in the public space. For example, blind persons were looking also for the barriers that we could have in terms of trees or the measurement of the width of the sidewalk or the crossings, how would they were developed. And no one was assuming which are the barriers. I think this type of information was really useful, and in terms of all the Latin American cities and the cities that were participating in this project have now a great baseline to work on and to achieve those SDGs that we want to achieve in terms of accessibility and inclusion.
Alda.
Thank you very
Audio
much,
mute.
Catherine, for sharing your best practice at the city of Quito, and it shows how it's very important to engage persons with disabilities in the designing of your project, and how this helps in monitoring and also in avoiding any challenges at implementation and usage by persons with disabilities. Is Monica back?
She's still trying to connect, Mohammed. This is Christopher. Do we have another speaker?
Yes, we do
And
have one more speaker.
And if not, I can jump in and
Sure.
cover some of the things that she talked about.
All right. Let me go to the next speaker, and then if Monica cannot join, then you can speak. How about that? Okay.
It sounds great.
Okay. So let me now turn to Ichi Tumer from the city of Istanbul, and we would like to hear from you about your city's project on procurement and your participation in the procurement launchpad of G3ict IAAP.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Mohammed. I'm Ece from Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality Smart City Department, and I'm responsible for international projects in our department. So with G3ict, we created our own ICT procurement policy, public policy, and then we were one of the pioneer cities in G40 Pioneer Smart City Alliance. And so we met with G3ict in that alliance, and then we worked during last year to create our own ICT procurement policy. And so as the municipality, some metropolitan municipality, we believe that the common problem of cities is increasing population. So increasing social, technical, and infrastructure needs also forced local governments to produce permanent solutions, and requires continuous improvement in service quality. So for this reason, we know that we need to assure our services, perspective, and strategies. And so we also know that, believe that the ICT purchased by the city is accessible to people with disabilities, and the responsibility here is to ensure accessibility lies with the city government, not the vendors. So the ICT also should be by strong global standards, and it also should leverage global best practices. So when we come to the driving force of the procurements, and so ICT products and services are the most scalable and frequently used tool in our modern society. So the cities around the world and all citizens use ICT to inform and serve the public. So at the same time, this digital transformation is generating huge amounts of data. So the procurement policies play in here a critical role in increasing accessibility. So they set expectations, the procurement policies set expectations, standards, and criteria for how goods and services are to be purchased, so that the city can ensure that they are universally used and made available to the consumer to ensure equitable growth and advancement for all. So in our program, we completed 6 sessions with G3ict and the experts. We did our kickoff meeting. They introduced the program. We have an overview about the program, and then in the next session, they introduced the basic concepts of accessible ICT procurement. So in the 3rd session, we started to they gave us some clues about the model policy, and they introduced also the relevant standards. So in the 4th session, we started to create the policy roadmap specifically for Istanbul. So because the processes and strategies and the procurement strategies differs from city by city. So we need to create our own local policy in accordance with the needs and the problems. So we started to establish the initial plan for the adoption of the model policy. And in the 5th session, we created the roadmap, and then we started to review it. So we started to review and finalize the roadmap and the draft policy. And in the 6th and last session, we came together with the decision makers of the municipality and G3ict experts. So we finalized our policy, and we introduced the roadmap and the draft policy, why we need to adopt this policy, and how we can adopt policy locally, and also how we can disseminate this process globally also. And so during the program, we worked with different departments also from the municipality. So as Smart City Department, we spearheaded the creation of the draft policy, helped coordinate other departments, and introduced the draft policy briefly to decision makers. And we had also information technology department, and they provided valuable information on current ICT accessibility requirements at the municipality, and they explained current accessibility procedures in the IT department. And lastly, we had persons with disabilities department, and they, during the process, during the sessions, they provided an information on current ICT accessibility requirements, and they helped
audio now on me.
They helped us how we can proceed. And in our model policy, we have 10 different sessions. We explained our goals, we explained our duties, responsibilities. We defined accessibility as local, and we create an accessibility structure in prep study. We include user standards, verification of eligibility, contract management, exemptions, training and capacity building, monitoring and evaluation, and periodic policy review. And so from now on, we plan to publish the policy, first of all, throughout the municipality. So we need to come together with also different departments like procurement department, tender department, and the social services department, and so on. So we need to disseminate this internally, and then we are planning to disseminate the policy globally. And so I also would like to thank you for all G3ict experts and the whole experts involving in the process. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Teşekkür ederim. Thank you, Eche, and thank you for the great work you are doing, and especially that you are trying to help other local
Question and
cities to adopt or replicate your program. That's great. So before I give the floor back to Monica or Chris, now we have Mr. Pierre Logia from France, and we're so happy that you were able to join us this afternoon, and we would like to hear from you about your perspective on the new resolution of UN Habitat on smart cities.
Thank you very much. I'm Pierre Loger from the French delegation at the UN here, and it's a pleasure to be with you for this side event today. I would like to start to thanking UN Habitat for its supports to making this event possible. For France, the sustainable development of cities is a key priority of our international action. To shape the cities of tomorrow, one emerging issue is from tremendous importance for us, but also for all the countries. This challenge is the rise of digital technologies in urban development. Digitalization has a very positive impact on human lives, but by providing job opportunities, enhancing access to basic services, and improving information sharing and collaboration between stakeholders. In the same time, if not managed well, digitalization can also exacerbate inequalities, reduce sustainability, compromise economic growth, and undermine the right to privacy. The lack of guidance at the international level on the use of digital technology in this area is hampering its development. That is why France has collaborated with the UN Habitat flagship program on people-centered smart cities from its beginning. This partnership was operationalized by the organization of the International Conference on Smart Cities in February 2022 in Strasbourg. More concretely, we have also supported through our French Development Agency the development of a network of 11 African smart cities called Aston, with the aim of developing digital practices for sustainable and inclusive cities. For us, a smart city is an innovative city that uses ICTs to improve quality of life, efficiency of urban services, and competitiveness, while ensuring that it meets the needs of present and future generation and respect human rights. We want to put the people in the center of smart cities. We want smart cities to be inclusive, sustainable, and creating economic opportunities. To have a common understanding of what would be the cities in the future, France has decided to draft and champion a resolution that gives a mandate to UN Habitat to developing international guidelines on smart cities. The objective of these guidelines is to help member states to implement the smart cities approach, including in the new urban agenda. Those guidelines would also establish common principles and standards at UN level on the subject of smart cities. This would create a climate of confidence to encourage private sector investment, the development of public-private partnership, and reassure urban dwellers who are concerned about the surveillance and the use of their private data. We started a consultative process on the resolution 6 months ago, here in Nairobi, in the margins of the executive board meeting. We have gathered 15 states in a group of friends of the resolution to tailor it to its purpose. The group met 3 times and had the opportunity to engage on the resolution. This consultative process paid off since today. I'm proud to announce that the Smart Cities resolution is the first out of 10 to have reached an agreement among the negotiators. I am now very confident that the next will be adopted this Friday at the end of the Assembly. Here, I would like to acknowledge the countries that have co-sponsored this resolution. But this is only the beginning of the journey, and we will use the same method of process and as inclusive and participatory as possible. In the next 2 years, experts from all member states will have the opportunity to meet, discuss, and together develop the guidelines. This side event is an important step to start collecting expertise in the views of developing the guidelines. I hope that all the panelists present today will be able to enlighten this inclusive process. And I want to thank you again, everyone, for being on that event.
Thank you.
From Trevor.
Thank you, Excellency, for your presentation, and thank you also for your efforts on promoting the rights of persons with disabilities to smart cities, and especially on the level of digital accessibility. Let me check if Monica's back.
Yeah, Monica.
Yes, I am back. Thank you.
All right, Monica. Well, let's hear from you. Do you want me to repeat the question, or you got it?
No, it's fine. I got it.
All right.
I'm
okay.
sorry. I am actually in the Guatemalan jungle. We're doing a workshop with municipalities here around digital inclusion. So for me, what was just said about equity, affordability, and inclusion is key. So I would love to talk with you about the maturity model and the launch pad for procurement of ICTs, accessible ICTs, that we have implemented, we developed and implemented in G3ict. I think that after what we've been hearing and the importance of in this digital transition of including everyone, those two instruments are very helpful. We heard a bit from the city of Chicago, and we implemented the first maturity model with them. So these tools help cities and municipalities to not only understand what digital inclusion is, but also to create a roadmap for the implementation of ICT accessibility. So in my experience, normally when we discuss digital inclusion, people tend to think that is only a matter of the Department of Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities. So when we have the opportunity to implement the maturity models, we have the opportunity to discuss to every different stakeholders and departments within a city that are buying technology, that are using technology for citizens. And it is important for them also to understand their role in the inclusion. It's not because I'm from the mobility department, I'm from the health department, from the education department. We really need to understand that these departments that are digitally transforming, they do have a role in the inclusion of every citizen, even though if they're not targeted as their main subjects. No, everyone is involved, everyone is getting involved, everyone will need at one moment or another accessible technologies. And another tool that we have put in place that is very useful is the launch pad for the procurement of accessible ICTs. If we include in our regulation, if we include in our procurement regulation, the requirements, the pertinent standards, and everything that really help us create an ecosystem of accessible technologies in the city. So one we include in our regulations, and we heard about that with other examples, when we include within our regulations in the city, in the procurement, the requirements of the technology to be accessible, the requirements and the standards that the technologies need to comply with, then we are at the least at the beginning of the journey, because the rules will be set. The technology vendors will understand that those are the requirements they need to comply. And the good externality is that we create an environment of innovation and development of accessible technologies. So I'm very happy to hear what went on in the resolution of the UN Habitat. I'm super excited to partner with the World Blind Union, to everyone who's in this call, to work together to create capabilities, to make sure that we create awareness on this such important issue of inclusion and smart cities, to avoid making the digital divide bigger. Sorry for all these interruptions, but that's what mostly I wanted to share with you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you very much for your insightful remarks. And at this point, I would like to again emphasize everything that's been said by all of our distinguished panelists. First of all, that digital accessibility is a human right, and in ensuring that digital accessibility standards are considered when it comes to urban development and smart cities. This is something very crucial to ensure that persons with disabilities would enjoy and have access to every single service, product, and public good offered by the city. And we heard about best practices in different cities, Chicago, Quito, Istanbul, and how persons with disabilities are in the center of decision-making on these initiatives, and how we definitely can replicate these efforts to other cities in each country or that has been with us or around the world. We only have 12 minutes, maybe less, left for questions and answers. I welcome questions, but please be very brief. If you can write them in the Q&A section, that will be helpful, and then we'll go back to our panelists with some answers and closing remarks. Any questions?
Mohammed, this is Christopher. There's a question in the chat.
Yes.
What role can technology play in helping private bus drivers meet government imposed on time performance standards, but also provide an accessible and safe service for wheelchairs users? And Trevor is from the Australian Federation of Disability Organizations.
Thank you, Trevor. Who would like to get this answer? Maybe we can take a round of questions and then we'll go back to our panelists. Any other question?
Rachel Paul, IAAP to Regina Cohen. All panelists. Colin, would you like to ask?
I think Regina wanted to ask a question. Regina, you want to ask a question? Can you write it, please, in the Q&A section?
There is one, Mohammed. This is Christopher.
Sure.
How can organizations better meet the accommodation needs of workers with disabilities?
Yes. Any other question? If there are no more questions, maybe I'll go back to the panelists who would like to take these answers, these questions.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, it was unmoved and I was not finding. I just want to say about Catherine, we've been working together, she in Quito and me in São Paulo, and we recognized it in the middle and in the end that each city had a different reality, and persons with disability that wanted. São Paulo is a very big city, a megalopolis in Brazil, and completely more difficult than Quito. And it was very amazing to work with her and with the other 3 or 4 cities. And the reality was mainly because it was during the pandemic and we wanted to go to streets to work better in the project, but it was not possible only in the end. So this is to say, we can talk later about São Paulo because it was very good to work in this project. Thanks.
Thank you,
It's
Regina.
only that maybe I had many other things, but it's not the place now. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. So we have a couple of questions, and we have also Regina's remark. But so shall I go with the panelists one by one? Mr. Douglas, would like to address any of these questions, or do you have any closing remarks for us?
Thank you. No, I don't think I have the experience to be able to respond to any of the questions. I'd just like to thank everyone for giving us this opportunity and again, partnering with World Blind Union. I think it's been a really interesting session and hopefully something we can build on. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for being with us today. Mark.
Yeah, I can share a few thoughts on the question around accommodating workers with disabilities. I think a big part of it is having the right policies in place. So it's really important that organizations have policies that explain what their position is on reasonable accommodation, that include guidelines on how reasonable accommodations can be requested and provided to those individuals. And then I would suggest that it's also very important to ensure that organizations work with those with disabilities when it comes to accommodations rather than imposing them, because they really are needing to be individualized if they're going to be effective. So those are just a few thoughts, and I found the discussion really interesting today. I think the things that stood out for me around procurement, engaging organizations of people with disabilities, those were our key elements of WBU's view and our work around this issue. And so it was really great to hear that from the different panelists and to hear some of the work that's being done in the different cities around the world. So thanks for organizing.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Monica?
Thank you, Mohammed. And well, I would love also to take on what Mark just said at the beginning. Solutions sometimes are not that hard. Technology, most of the times, do include accessibility and inclusive issues. So it's to work together to really create awareness on the importance of making, from the beginning, all our services accessible for both the citizens and also for our workers, because it's the same. We're all working in a digital environment. So let's create joint efforts to create capabilities around what digital inclusion is, what are those features that we need to have in our technologies in order to be able to interact in the digital arena with equality and equity. So very happy to be here and to join forces for this task. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you. Mr. Pierre, Excellency, do you have any closing remarks to us or anything you would like to add onto what you said?
No, just that the smart cities, it's as I previously said, is the future of what should be, but of course that works with accessibility and
Monica Doom left for a G3ict.
Yes,
and the main things to do is to think the futures of smart cities with inclusion and with accessibility at the very beginning of all the processes. Of course, it's easier when you are building up a new section in a town, but it's also a real goal to aim for our older cities. It's more difficult, but it is a real aim to have. Thank you.
All done.
thank you, Mr. Pierre. Thank you, Excellency. We have George from Kenya is asking a question. Can somebody read it, please?
Sure, this is Rachel. It says Georgia's in Nairobi, Kenya, and how can we have a smooth transfer of the smart cities technologies, let's say from New York to Nairobi?
Well, I would say collaboration and sharing experiences, and definitely partnership is crucial, especially if we can bring representatives of organizations with or persons with disabilities. But I don't know if Monica, Chris, Mark would like to add anything. Also, we have Catherine and Edge still with us.
Well, I can take that question, and
Sure.
I think that it's a process for every city. I don't think there is a specific path for everyone, but we have to know that we have to join forces with every stakeholder, being part and taking together all the decisions in terms of the implementation and working together to achieve inclusive and accessible cities. Technology gives us the opportunity to participate with every stakeholder and to have solutions in terms of what we want to achieve and where we want to go. I think that the municipalities and all the authorities have to take part of these type of processes, and also take all the information they could have to create this type of baselines and work on together to have like more inclusive transport, inclusive education, inclusive everything, and like all the services have to be inclusive. So I think it's a process for every city that has to implement. It is not something that has to be done later. I think that everyone can do step by step and going on this type of achievements and working, like taking into account all the like the best practices that have been done all around the world is a good initial stage to work on together, and how we can adapt these type of projects into our own environment to have this type of progress. I think that's all, and we have to join forces for that.
Thank you, Catherine. Gracias. Last but not least, no?
Mohammed, I just wanted to say something. This is Christopher.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah, taking off what Catherine just said, I do think it's about partnerships, and I think the World Blind Union, UN Habitat, the World Economic Forum, and UCLG are just a few of the partners that have come together around this, I believe, and it's pretty exciting. And then coming up with those good practices and publishing them and getting them out there. And to your point, Mohammed, it is about sharing and collaboration.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. So last but not least, Ed, do you want to add anything? You want to give us your closing remarks?
Yeah, hello. I just would like to say that I think being smart is not related to technology and digitalization itself. So the being smart is totally related to which kind of tool we are going to use. We need to know the tool itself. So the technology here is just a tool for us, because we are serving for people, and so we need to be people human oriented. So we need to be inclusive. We need to create accessible environment for all, accessible cities for all. So in that sense, as I said before, technology is just a tool here, and being smart is totally related to the usage type, usage method of these tools. So in that sense, we are looking for the concept of smart like that, and just that's all. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much, and thank you all for all our panelists and our participants for this very engaging and wonderful panel discussion. Thank you for IAAP and the team, and all of those who have been working on the preparation of this side event, and all of those who have been working on ensuring the accessibility of this side event. We look forward to seeing you again in another side event or events like this, and thank you very much all. Thank you. Have a good evening.
From Doug Reagan to all panelists, thank you everyone. Zoom webinar. To move to an item, Alt F4. Escape. Alt F4. Leave web.